You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are ladies things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, we've been bringing the show for 16 years, 2,000 episodes, all the greatest people, all the smartest minds, the most brightest people in the world on the show, bringing their stories, their books, their everything that you can possibly learn about, and all that good stuff. So be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, Chris Voss on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, if you want to buy me a coffee, you can go buymeacoffee.com/Chris Voss. Today we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his hot new book that's come off the presses, and this is going to be a helpful show today. Not only are we talking about trauma, which you seem to talk about a lot on the show over the last few years, especially after COVID. I think we all got trauma from COVID. It's staying home, I guess. Is basically how to fix it, how to heal from it. So we've got an upside. We're going to learn some stuff today. His book is the latest that comes out March 15th, 2024. It is called This Is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods, a practical guide for healing past intergenerational stress and trauma. Ernest, Ellender, PhD, doc, is on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about his book and how you can heal yourself from painful childhoods. Is there anybody who hasn't had a painful childhood? I don't know. But we'll be talking to him on the show about all his insights and everything that goes into it. Ernest worked in the fields of psychology, life coaching, and martial arts for over 20 years before publishing his first book entitled The Aforementioned. With his book, he offers his empowering curriculum to readers across the world who wish to heal from their past and develop the knowledge and skills necessary for success in relationships and life. Nowadays, he continues to operate both his martial arts school and life coaching services, promoting his new book, and he's here right now. Welcome to the show, Ernest. How are you?
Quite well. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thanks for coming. It's wonderful to have you. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Ernest Ellender, PhD.com is my personal one that has, life coaching services and things like that. Then there's also healfromchildhood.com, which is predominantly for the book. Also on LinkedIn and Facebook, of course.
There you go. It seems like all the sort of things that ail us throughout life all kind of originate from childhood. What's that about?
Yeah, it's shocking how much it sets us up for life. And in adulthood, is whether you're aware of it or not, it's just amazing. 80-90% of our successes and failures are set up in childhood, unless we directly try to educate ourselves about it and look at it and unpackage it, repack it, and figure out what from our childhood is still impacting us. It's amazing. If you haven't looked into it and really thought about it, it's a worthwhile endeavor to do so.
If you haven't looked into it, it's kind of like being that person in the room where you're like, everyone else is stupid. Might be you. Yeah. If you haven't looked into it, it might be something you need to look into because you might have a scotoma or a blind spot there. And, the funny thing is most people really don't start looking at their traumas until they're about 40 or 50. And I think we wake up a little bit. Our brains wake up a little bit by then. But by then we've got such a track record. I remember looking back on mine going, wow, I've been dragging that for 50 years. That's quite the mess I left behind me. Ernest, give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside your book.
I would just, emphasize what you just said, which is that most of my clients in the past have been usually in their early 30s is kind of the earliest to come in. It's like a young, your teens and your 20s, you're so young and full of fire, they just fight and get through life. And then by the 30s, you start to slow down a little bit, and the consequences of all this stuff starts building up. And usually in the early to mid 30s, that's when people start saying, it might be helpful for me to go do something about this stuff.
Yeah. It could be me.
It could be me. Is a third marriage or something like that, and my best clients are usually in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I love it when I get somebody in their 20s come in, late 20s come in. I'm like, wow, you're actually ahead of the curve. getting in here and doing something about it, just learning about the process, you know. But yeah, that's the age thing is really. I just wish that we had more education of this in the high school so we could get a heads up about it before it even hits us in the face, going out there into the work world.
Yeah,
it'd be wonderful, but it's not. You know.
I'm a big advocate for. I mean, I didn't need to learn algebra in school. Like anybody could have looked at me and my school scores and went, "This kid's an idiot. He's going nowhere, and he doesn't need to learn algebra too."
You don't do algebra on your Chris Voss show?
No, we have a strict policy against it. In fact, we're trying to get the legislature in Utah to pass a law against algebra. But show me on the doll where algebra hurt you, Chris. Anyway, that's for another psychological exam with my therapist. I'll be meeting with him for a few more hours today. Anyway.
So the book.
Yeah.
My book is, I consider it like a curriculum. And, you know, I went into it a little bit in the book, and I didn't want to go too much into the book directly because a lot of people do not do martial arts themselves. But as a martial artist myself, when you do martial arts, you learn what has to function correctly. You learn what you have to learn to be effective. Either it works or doesn't. And so it's a wonderful study that teaches us how to learn and what needs to happen. And that's where my book is built on, like, basically a black belt curriculum. So there are these 20 rules that you have. And on the first day, for example, you might come to class, like you go to a jiu-jitsu class, and for the first month, you might learn Jiu-Jitsu 101. And this is the overview of what you need to learn over the next 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
And so you know from day one, I need to learn how to defend. I need to know how to attack. I need to know how to chain multiple combinations together. I need to know how to work balance and all these different things. Cognitively, I know how to do those. I'm not good at any of them yet. I just know how to do them. And oftentimes when people read these books, self-help books, they believe that once they learn it, that information is now in their brain and they understand how to do it. And so they can just do it. And that's not the case.
Yeah. It's sometimes people buy a book and they just figure that I bought the book and so I've assimilated its knowledge without having to read it. I sometimes have made that assumption. I have the book.
Like put it under your pillow and by osmosis it'll just filter into your brain, you know.
That's how it works.
Some people put audiobooks while they sleep, so it's reading to them. And
I've never thought of that. I'll do audiobooks on the way to the gym or whenever I'm driving, but I haven't thought of that. Yeah, just put it on the pillow. Subconscious.
And getting the information into the brain so we understand the abstract concepts is important. It's necessary. One of the chapters is, education, training, et cetera, is necessary. The educational component is necessary because if you don't understand why you're in this self-sabotaging loop, then it's almost impossible to get out of it. You don't see the blind spot. You don't see the cycle. But then to actually get out of it, it's like somebody keeps armbarring me. Somebody keeps submitting me with the same submission in martial arts and jiu-jitsu. First, I have to know what's going on. And then once I understand it, then I can start figuring out the moves that I have to practice hundreds and a couple of thousand times. I need 1,000 to 2,000 repetitions of it before I can do that move on a black belt level. When we're trying to shift from a very combative, argumentative style of interacting with your loved one, trying to shift from that to a collaborative, problem-solving, structured, supportive communication style, it takes several thousand repetitions, which is it's daunting to think of that, but the sooner you start on it, the sooner you learn the little skills and start practicing them. Listen actively, summarize, acknowledge, all those receptive steps before you even say anything back. As soon as you start practicing the repetition, that your muscles learn it, your brain gets into it, start to enjoy it, but it takes those repetitions.
Yeah. So maybe think before you speak, basically, is the shorthand of that. But I like that setup because, I practice a lot of stoicism. So when people come at me with stuff, I tend to lock down. And I think it's kind of a male thing, too, that we lock down or trying to be responsive, at least in a masculine sense. But guys who operate in their feminine will respond with emotion. So there you go. We're going to round back in the book, but people like to get to know the author early on too as well. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what shaped you, what made you want to become a psychologist and get into this field.
Man. I grew up in South Louisiana, and to me, South Louisiana is just the best. I mean, it's amazing food, and it's just I was in a small town, so I got to go play in the back of the neighborhood. This was back in the late 70s, 80s. So on Saturday morning, the parents would just feed us breakfast and kick us out at 8 a.m. and say, come back before dark. And so we go play in the back of the neighborhood in the bayous. We went swimming and hunting and fishing. And, 12 years old, I had my shotgun out there and was fixing our own lunch for ourselves out there, picking wild onions and whatnot. It was just, to me, it was a playland. And luckily I was fortunate enough to not run into my own personal terrible traumas in that fashion with all that free reign. But I love South Louisiana. That was fantastic. In my household, my parents and grandparents highly valued education, and particularly a formal education. So I went through the entire formal education route. Did very well in school. So I ended up getting to go to Jesuit High School in New Orleans, which is a really tough school in New Orleans, and then went to undergraduate, then after graduate school, got my PhD in clinical psychology. And when I went to go to grad school, I was very glad that one of the professors here at home said, make sure you get out of this area, because we're very conservative and traditional in South Louisiana. It's very conservative. So he said, get out of here and think how other people in the country think, get out of that way of thinking. So I went to the West Coast, went to California for my PhD. Ended up taking me 8 years. 7 years of it was out in California, and another year out on the East Coast. I went to the East Coast. So I got the South, the West Coast, and then the East Coast, just to see different cultures and see how people think differently, and kind of open my mind up to different possibilities. And it's pretty wonderful. So now I'm back home. I love, like I said, I moved back to Houma, moved back to Louisiana. I probably want to die here, but I love going and traveling and seeing things. And I was an athlete when I was young, swam a lot, and then got into, we didn't have wrestling or jiu-jitsu in my hometown. We didn't have those grappling martial arts. We only had the striking ones like karate, and I wasn't into that. So it was in college that I was finally exposed to that, and I just obsessively dove into it. And I just love martial arts and jiu-jitsu.
There you go.
Later on, I got into striking also, just to be well-rounded. But so I came back home with a brown belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and my PhD in clinical psychology, and I was just ready to serve the community. And when you say what drives me, my grandfather was a doctor in Houma. He was one of the only 2 doctors in Houma for a while. Pretty wild. And my father was an orthodontist, and they were very heavily involved in community, or you call it like charity and stuff like that. So it just kind of came natural to me that what I wanted to do for my occupation was to help people some way, just serve people. It feels good, when you have contributed, you've made somebody else's life better. You just sleep better at night. It's pretty awesome. It's awesome to be in that kind of a job,
Yeah, knowing that you changed the world for a better place and left a better place behind.
Yeah.
Makes all the difference in the world. I think there's something biologically built into us, or human nature built into us, that makes that rewarding for us some way.
I'm a huge fan of Mother Nature, of studying nature. That's part of what drew me to psychology, just the study of human thinking. And our very genetics are like optimized for pro-social behaviors. With a little bit of training, we really optimize that. But with some negative things, it goes the other route. Antisocial behaviors, So it's important to spend enough time developing the environment so that the younger generation gets that good part of the DNA that's naturally tuned to try to help one another. That's our natural stasis. That's our natural inclination.
It's kind of what I kind of lost track of what I was saying earlier about the algebra thing. But they need to teach psychology in school and stuff so people can learn that. Now are you still a 3rd degree black belt in jiu-jitsu?
Yes. Third degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
There you go. So how does that help you? I know that's not, it's not so much physical too, but it's mental as well. How does that help you, maintain psychological presence, I guess?
Man, I could go so much into it. It's so much fun. There is some physical component to it, because as I'm, let's say I'm working with a client, and the client is just not seeing something, or I want something more for the client than they want for themselves. And I'm feeling the tension in my chest. I feel my own frustration. I want for this person more than they want for themselves. I want them to succeed. I want them to excel. I want them to thrive. And I feel that physical tension in my martial arts training. In jiu-jitsu, if you're putting all your effort into something that's not working, well, you have to relax, shift, back up, think, and take a different tack. Like you have to change your angles, change your effort, change your mindset. So it's quickly realizing the tension. The tension is just the trigger. It pulls the trigger. Oh, and what do? We take a quick step back in our mind and breathe, relax, and meet my client where they are right there. They're just not ready for that next thing that I want. That next thing that I want from them might be 2 years down the line.
Wow.
I can be a very impatient person at times, but then it's, oh, no, wait. You cannot skip the belts in martial arts. You can't skip from white belt to black belt. You can't do it. It's impossible. You have to go through white, blue, purple, brown, black. And it's the same thing. I want somebody to be a high-level communicator, but on day one, if they can't just breathe and calm themselves down, if they don't have that skill, it is impossible for them to communicate in a collaborative fashion with their significant other when their significant other has said something that triggers them. It's impossible. So we have to slow down. So it's this awareness from the martial arts, because it's such a physical thing in the martial arts. I keep trying this thing and it doesn't work. And it's obvious it doesn't work because somebody keeps choking me on, and I'm like, I keep losing. I keep tapping. I keep almost going unconscious. It's obvious. And so I know that I have to calm down, slow down, take a break, learn this other thing, and then come back to it. And that's how it helps me too, in the moment, meet my client where they are, slow down, and get them excited about slowing down and learning this new thing, because this new skill, just being able to breathe and calm ourselves and regulate our own emotions in the midst of anxiety or fear, just that skill it changes your life. It's amazing. Yeah. It opens the door to 100 other skills that were closed, that you cannot learn until you got that one down. So it's on a daily basis. I'm aware of how my martial arts training has positively impacted and informed my style of life coaching and the writing in the book, the 20 rules. These are 20 techniques or 20 concepts. It's a curriculum. And each one of them takes years to develop to advance proficiency.
There you go. And
my martial arts just informed my entire process.
There you go. I know it's such a mental game. That's one of the reasons I go to the gym. It's more for, it's not really about, one of the epiphanies I had going to the gym is not really about lifting weights. It's about discipline. It's about, there's a lot of things that go into it, but it's more of a mind game than anything. It's a battle with yourself. And that's kind of really what it's about. It's not about getting muscles, and that's kind of a byproduct, but really having the discipline to show up every day, push yourself to new levels, even when you don't want to show up, you show up, all that sort of stuff.
How much do you go through spells where you lift regularly or you work out regularly and then you take a month or two off?
I don't take a month or two off unless I get hurt, unless I get an injury. But
even from an injury.
Sometimes I'll take a week off. Like, I think recently I took a week off, just wasn't feeling it, and my sleep schedule was mucked up, and I have to sleep well to lift. But for the most part, I stick to it. It's every other day, and I do my legs and arms and stuff, and sometimes I have to take a day off because I'll get cramps or something. I got to make sure my potassium's up, or else, I'm 56. It's a constant fight with potassium and magnesium to keep everything oiled up. But part of it is I was low on testosterone up until November, and then I started testosterone therapy, and that's made a difference in me being able to bulk muscle up. But I try and stay on it. So let's tease out some different things that you address in the book. You talk about chronic anxiety symptoms, unhealthy, chaotic, toxic relationships, survival-based thinking. That's kind of interesting. We haven't talked a lot about that on the show, survival-based thinking, personal and family substance abuse. What are the 20 key concepts you have talking about different things? Do you want to tease out or I'll let you have the floor.
I mean, even just starting with the survival-based thinking, that's a fascinating one. For example, I kind of get some of the 20 mixed up. But it's who we are in sympathetic is not who we are in parasympathetic. That's the name of chapter 2, where we just understand when I am in a fear-based survival mode, I'm not the same person as when I feel safe and I'm comfortable. When I feel safe and comfortable, I might be a very pro-social, friendly, creative, intelligent, fun guy or whatever, or a very giving, loving guy. But when I'm panicked in a moment, we do crazy things. Sometimes we just lash out. We hurt people. We run and hide our head, or we just fight instinctively and hurt people that we love. Who we are in survival mode is not who we are in safety mode, in rest and digest mode. So once we understand that, then the next step is figuring out what is your particular style of survival. So we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. These are the 4 different survival responses we have as human beings, and animals have much of the same, right? But so fight, that's obvious. I fight that thing that's in front of me. As soon as something puts me in a survival mode and panic mode, whatever the situation, I start fighting whatever's in front of me. There's fight, flight. As soon as something happens, my instinct might be to just run away, get away, hide, isolate. A third is freeze. This is just numb out and freeze. In the wild, those who froze, some predators only see their prey by motion. So the people who just froze, they survived, And then fawn is one that's much less understood oftentimes. So a lot of people say fight or flight, and some people add fight, flight, freeze. The 4th one is fawn. And fawn is when you cater to the more dangerous person in the room, the predator in the room. You fawn, you do what they want, you do what they say so that they'll let you survive. And it's a really important one when it comes to childhood trauma, because in childhood, I mean, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, they can't fight the adults and they can't run away. There's no way to run away to. They live in the house. They can't imagine being elsewhere. And then numbing out so they're kind of left with freeze or fawn.
Yeah.
And some people, when they go into the freeze mode, they'll often get into dissociation and they just kind of go numb. And then the fawn is getting into a heavy people pleasing and deferring to the more important other person in the room as a means of survival.
Wow.
So as an adult, everybody can do all 4 of them, by the way. We all do. Every human can do all 4 of them. Different dangers trigger all 4 of them for us.
Wow.
But you're going to generally rank order them in a certain style. Just out of those 4, which one makes the most sense for you? Do you naturally combatively fight, or take off, or just numb out to the other person?
When my trauma wasn't healed, I was very reactionary. So you'd set me off if you gaslit me, if I sensed I was being abused, and that's really what it was coming down to. So then I was very reactionary. Now I tend to hold a lot of, you described earlier in the show, the mental pattern where you slow stuff down, or you stop and you listen, you try and focus and you go, what's going on? I need to focus more on my breathing too. But for the most part, you try and slow things down, and if someone's coming at you, no matter how hard they're coming at you, you will sit and try and get control, unless it's an emergency situation. Of course, someone's going to hit you with a knife, you're going to react a little differently. But yeah, I usually try and read the situation. If it's overwhelming and someone is being beyond reasonable, and then I'll remove myself from the situation without saying a thing. Yeah. And then I'll come back when they are calm. But I'm really good about walking away these days, and setting boundaries, of course, is a big important thing too as well. We're never doing that again.
So it sounded like you shifted a little bit from recognizing you're a reactionary fight.
Yeah.
And in our modern world, that doesn't often work too well. When you talk about a life-threatening immediate situation of a gun or knife being pulled, then yes, fight is an appropriate survival response for certain. I mean, that's how my martial arts training is at. But 99.9% of the time, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about my significant other saying something that triggers me and angers me or upsets me. That these are words that trigger my fear of rejection or what have you. And the response is to fight like that. That's not fitting the situation. So you learned how to subdue that, calm it, regulate it, and then decide on the flight one. Yeah. Flight momentarily until everybody's cool off, and then you come back to it.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's an entire skill set that takes many people at least 6 months, a year, 2 years to develop, to really enhance.
There's a lot to my value. I don't know. There might be a bit of dark triad, narcissistic, psychopathy, Machiavellian thing, but I have a pretty high value of myself. And so when people come at me, there's kind of a mode I'll go into that's very evaluative, and I'll stop. And it's kind of what you guys do, I think, in jiu-jitsu. Isn't jiu-jitsu the part of the thing where when people come at you, you take their power and use it against them? Is that the form?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the concept. The reality of it is often significantly more challenging than that.
Yeah. So I'll just shut it down. Like once somebody comes at me with a response, they're not getting a response from me because I'm sitting there going into command mode of the situation, and mentally and physically. And I'm a very dominating person at 6'2", and I'm a very big person. So it becomes apparent very quickly to people that Chris is going into a whole different mode, and he's very aware of what's going on, but he's not being reactionary. He's not saying anything either. And, I'm taking the data in, and that becomes offsetting to people that are coming at me at a certain point because they're like, this isn't working.
Yeah, I was about to say, when you start railing against some person, some man or woman, and they just respond to this chaos and this aggression with
nothing,
a poised, confident stare, be very aware of who you're talking to, because
that's how I am.
Like,
I have that resting bitch face. I can look at you like I'm probably going to tear an arm off of you. But yeah, I will go into that mode, and I will just, some women shame it and they call it you're shutting down from me, but you're not. You're basically going into command mode, and part of it is leadership too. As a leader, I've written books about leadership. As a leader, you're going to have to deal with these kind of people in your world, and you've got to take some choices as to how you're going to lead that person to the promised land out of whatever they're in. Yeah. And so part of it's going into a leadership mode. So when I say, narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, there's a bit of king in me that starts taking over and going, okay, I see the battle we're in. We've got to somehow figure out how to get you through this other side and get you calmed down without me sending you to the gallows.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's usually my thing. If it's extraneous, where I've had women come up and start hitting me. I had an alcoholic girlfriend one time, and, come up and hitting me, and I have to fold my arms and protect myself. And at some point, I have to exit the room. So I've had that situation where you need to exit at that point. But usually, I can if I shut down and go quiet enough, people will start to calm down because they'll just rage themselves out.
Yes. Yeah. When aggression comes at you and you're presented with this post that doesn't speak and doesn't move,
you got nothing.
Eventually the silence of nothing being returned doesn't instigate. And this is a great example of what I was talking about as far as the curriculum, learning in different layers on this concept of in the martial arts and Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu, and we use the attacker's momentum against us, right, in judo. Yeah. So somebody comes at me and I twist and turn and make them fall on their head. Okay. On day one, that works well. And on day one, that's what you learn. And so that's great. As soon as you go with somebody who's athletic or too strong or more manipulative than you, that initial concept doesn't work, because they don't, like, for me to use your momentum against you, You have to really come at me hard. But when somebody comes at me not super hard because they're trained and they're not going to overextend themselves. They're not going to offer you that unbridled aggression. They come in a more calculated fashion. Now I need to make you give me more momentum by doing different things. So now I need to learn misdirection in martial arts. Now I need to physically exercise. It would be wonderful if I could just learn the martial arts so well that I can make you do flips by just moving my hands, like in the movies. But it doesn't work that way. I have to be physically strong enough to encourage you in this fashion. So now I need to go and lift weights and become a physically strong person and this other thing.
There you go. So maybe the analogy of this or whatever is that you need to do that psychologically or mentally in your head to deal with that with
absolutely
people when they come at you.
You know, so when we have two people who are coming from dysfunctional backgrounds who both come from very combative communication backgrounds, that's how their families both functioned. And so of course we marry into, we pair with what is familiar to us. It feels comfortable. So I yell, and so I marry a yeller, you know? And so suddenly we realize 8 years into the marriage, like either we have to change this or we got to split. So we go for therapy and we're trying to learn, okay, when the person comes at me yelling, first I have to be able to not respond. Respond with that, like you're talking about, with that blank or that strong but not reactive thing. That's the first part. And then what's the next skill that I have to be able to practice? I have to be able to practice like one technique is like a broken record technique where I just say the same thing over and over. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. I'd like you to take 2 steps back, please. Take 2 steps back, and you just repeat the same thing until that happens. Really? And when your partner is really lost in their rage, in their triggered rage, you might have to say that 20, 30 times.
Wow.
But you don't move on until that one is successful.
Yeah.
So that's another skill. That's a boundary setting skill.
Boundaries.
And then after I can keep myself calm and not get pulled into.
Yeah.
Because once you start responding to aggression with chill, then the person who is really good, so they ramp it up. They come at you with more aggression.
Yeah.
Like, wait, no, we've been fighting. We've been fighting. You need to fight back.
Yeah.
What are you, a wimp? You got to fight back. What are you not? They find different manipulative, not on purpose, accidentally more manipulative ways to draw you into the fight. Yeah. Come here and fight with me. No, wait, we got to develop a dozen different skills with a bunch of repetitions for each one to be able to shift from combative communication to collaborative.
Yeah.
Takes a long time, man.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I'm not sure I could do the move 2 inches back. I mean, I'll use that because that's the other thing they do is you say they'll ramp up. They'll also get closer to you in your face, and then you start feeling more of that fight or flight danger. But for me, you know, what I've learned over time, and this comes to masculinity and it also works in dating, is signaling value. And so a lot of what I do is knowing, number one, my value, which is really important. I think people maybe that have been through trauma and damage, you know, they need to heal their trauma, but they also need to figure out their value. And I wield my value. And so when people come at me, you know, I can, you know, if I'm just in a relaxed setting, we're just having fun and hanging out and stuff, you know, my guard's down. But and I'm a relaxed person, but as soon as those sort of crazy things start happening, I start not really shutting down. I'm actually building up. And so you're going to get the pull, but this wall that you're going to hit with me, but you're also going to have me looking at you and holding myself taller, more powerful, in a powerful stance, and in a way that signals that I'm high value and you're acting very low value right now. And, you know, so I'm not being weak by not being baited into your stupid shit. I'm actually very powerful right now mentally, and I'm above you. And, you know, one of the things that a lot of women will try and do is they'll use some of this stuff as shit tests, right? And so they'll come at you with this stuff to see how you respond and see if you're still in your masculine, if you're still holding frame. And so it's really important in how you respond to that, where she's not going to see you as weak. And so I've gotten very good at it, where I can go into that state, and it's like I become more powerful, and I stand taller, and I just become this almost king that's sitting there at the throne going, really, in my court, this. And people can feel it, I think, because I change physiologically into it, and it becomes a very powerful stance. It's almost like a battle stance without being in battle. Kind of like maybe, I don't know, you take a defensive stance in jiu-jitsu to show that, you can come at me, but maybe you shouldn't.
Yes. And the scenario you're describing would correspond with a couple of the rules. For example, rule number 8 is we have to practice treating yourself in a self-loving, self-respecting fashion.
Yeah.
So as you develop these kinds of skills, as you develop that insight and that awareness, self-awareness, and these, skills of interaction in these difficult scenarios, you learn how to not accept disrespectful behaviors. You learn how to set your own boundaries more comfortably. I'm just not going to absorb this because I love myself. I respect myself too much. Mm-hmm. So on the one level, there's some degree of that, as well as these different skills from learning how to stay in calm mode when the other person is losing their stuff, Yeah. So on the one hand, we're practicing some of those skills, and on the other side, and I've done this many, many times, all right? If I find myself being successful in showing that I am more kingly than the person in front of me, mm-hmm. I have to slow down and ask myself, why do I keep putting myself in a situation where I'm coupling with somebody who I have to put in their place or something like that? Mm-hmm. So who am I picking? So rule number, I think 19 is will versus skill. Both are necessary. Mm-hmm. And when we look at each other, if I go into any environment, any individual either has a bunch of skill sets or they don't. Mm-hmm. And then they have either desire or ambition to improve those or not. Yeah. So to be in a high level, mutually supportive, mutually collaborative, mutually wonderful relationship, both individuals have to have the skills and the desire to apply those skills to the relationship.
Definitely.
So if I am defending myself against one girlfriend after the next, man, why do I keep picking people who are attacking me? Wait a minute. I need to respect myself enough and hold myself to a different standard of, okay, if I believe I have this much to bring to a relationship, I have these skills, I'm going to push myself to select a partner who also has these kinds of skills, mm-hmm. which is kind of scary. When we talk about, a lot of times as men, it feels better to come into a relationship where you kind of have the upper hand. It just feels more manly. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you come in a relationship with a true equal when it comes to relationship skills or, relationship skills mainly, but also, maybe like the work world is very successful, doctor, woman, mm-hmm. or partner, what have you. There's a whole nother level of applying these things.
Yeah.
Why do I keep fighting? What's going on here?
Yeah. It's the thing I realized with my trauma, and you tell me if this is true, but part of the reasons people get triggered and reactionary over things like, being like, one of my things was I didn't like being gaslit. I don't like hypocrisy. I don't like being gaslit. And I had some real problems in 2016 when someone was elected to office that does a lot of gaslighting. And I found it very consuming and hard to deal with mentally for me. And so what I surmised, and this is my theory, is that when we feel like when we're being triggered, when we're, reacting emotionally very quickly to something because, we feel that we're being whatever, it's because we feel like we're being re-victimized again from whatever that happened, that trauma was from childhood. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. We can go one further and say, so that's the part of it we call re-experiencing. Oh. So there's two main clusters of symptoms when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder or childhood trauma stuff. One is the re-experiencing of it. And if we want to understand it from a very natural survival perspective, our primal brain and the base of our brain is in charge of keeping us safe. And if it encountered something dangerous in childhood and then just forgot about it, it'd be doing a terrible job because it would not protect you from that situation recurring. So it holds on to it. It memorizes it crystal, and it keeps bringing it up for you in memories and emotions and smells and thoughts, and it keeps repeating it. And the message to me is just don't forget, don't forget. Don't forget. They're going to get you. They're going to get you. Don't forget. If you let your guard down, they're going to get. So much so that one version of re-experiencing it is me subconsciously, not knowingly, but accidentally repeating the process.
Yeah.
Like repeating, like me putting myself back in these dangerous scenarios so that, but this time the brain is saying, yeah, but it's on my terms now. I'm practicing to survive it. So not only do we re-experience it from the body, from the brain reminding us of it, but it draws us back to these situations. Now, the other cluster of symptom is avoidance. When it's obvious, I'm going to try to avoid it. I might say, I dated an alcoholic, so I am never going to date another alcoholic. I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to run away from it. So I end up, so I end up dating a heroin addict or something like that, but it's not an alcoholic. I'm accidentally drawn to something that's the same, but it doesn't look the same.
Just get out of addicts totally, damn it.
Yeah. And then, I'm no more substance abusers. And then I accidentally marry a workaholic. I didn't think about workaholism or sexaholic oh man. So there's the re-experiencing, the draw to it, the re-experiencing of it. And then there's the avoidance of it. And those are very confusing. It's very confusing until we learn those patterns, learn the natural course of it, so we can see it a little bit better. And then spend the time and repetition to develop the skills to enable us to exit that and kind of learn a new reality. What's it like to date somebody who has no addictive, I don't know, never done it. So what's it like?
Does everyone have addictive personality addictions technically? I mean,
no, but it's weird when I run into them. When I run into people who do not have the personality characteristics for addictive behaviors, it's almost confusing to me because in South Louisiana, man,
I don't have them. It's nice to not have them. But, I lived in Vegas for 20 plus years now. And you want to talk about meeting people who have addictive issues. There's a lot of them here, man. And you have to really work hard to avoid them.
I think in the Luxor pyramid, there's an electromagnet for addictive personalities. Just bring them to Vegas.
That's probably what that thing is about. There's something that you touched on that I wanted to go back to, and I think I lost track of it. But we're pretty deep in the show. Let's talk about what your services are that you offer on your website, so we can get a plug in here for those. How can people work with you? I know there's a book online. There's different services. Tell us about some of the stuff you do on the website.
So they have individual coaching sessions, or they have these cluster of sessions, maybe 6 or 8 sessions or a full day of working on individual concepts. Okay, let's get an overview of what it's like to go from combative to collaborative communication, or what does it mean to start the process of learning how to exit our survival mode and get into the calm mode. So those are kind of individual concepts. So we can either work on individual concepts, individual skill sets, kind of really focus on that skill set. And it's a set curriculum. It's like taking a little mini course on how to do pottery or something like that, So there's that kind of thing where we focus on an individual skill. And then there's also, I really enjoy when somebody has done kind of a lot of the basics. They've already worked with a mental health professional, somebody who's like the local therapist to be able to calm themselves and maintain parasympathetic, those types of basics. And then they're trying to apply the more advanced concepts, the 20 rules, in increasingly complex scenarios. That's really my favorite. So it's people who are struggling in their family, like trying to find the right balance of interacting with toxic individuals, but then minimizing it. How do you
not to choke your family members at Thanksgiving?
Yes. How do we do that? And how do we have interaction and have relationship, but do it in a safe and self-respecting fashion? Just the higher level, the real intricacies of fine-tuning these things. How do we optimize a marriage? How do we optimize a relationship? How do I not react to conflict at work in this aggressive fashion? These kinds of fine-tuning things what I really enjoy in the life coaching. And that's just, I kind of follow the lead of my clients. They call up, hey, this is specifically what I would like. I'm very targeted. Oh, that's the finish line. Let's see how fast we can get there.
There you go. So I see several different programs and courses that are on your website. You've got in couples and marriage coaching, so that's probably good. Probably a lot of stop hitting each other. No, I'm just kidding.
That's kind of two-parter. A lot of times with that, you have two people who are coming from kind of rough backgrounds.
Yeah.
So some of that is like just the educational component, to where they start arguing, pause, start breathing, calm down, and let's learn a little bit about the science of what's going on. Mm-hmm. You're not angry at her. You're angry at your parent, and this is what's being repeated. This is clearly a cycle that you're aware of, but you forgot about it in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an educational component to it, and then there's now let's practice this new skill. Let's follow this communication cheat sheet strictly. Later on, we can free flow, but right now we're going to learn it strictly. So there's some educational component, and then some skills training component to it.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of the relationship stuff.
The thing that really helps me is understanding a potential partner in dating. So on the first date, I'm going to roundabout. I don't ask directly. I'm not dumb, but I'm going to find out for a woman what her relationship with her father now and in the past. I'm going to find out if he set a blueprint of being a good, healthy, masculine male in her life, or if he was in her life, and that's important too, because I found that women don't have that blueprint. They grow up without the father. Without that blueprint, I don't think there's just a recoverable position, in my opinion. I don't know.
I would say there is a recoverable position, in this, because there's a second part to it. I do the same thing now. Okay. I dated some women who had the rough background, did not have that set up. I figured, I can handle all this, but it was not. That's not the case. It was disastrous.
Yeah.
So someone can have a terrible history, and it's kind of, I don't want to hold it against them in the sense that they didn't have that modeling, they didn't have that experience. But the second major question is, have they done something specific about it?
Yeah.
Have they gone to some therapy? Do they have the insight? Are they aware of that? Are they aware that the anger that they start to feel at me is not really for me? And are they able to monitor and check it themselves?
Yeah.
That's a whole different story. So somebody who was an addict and they're now 6 years sober, but they never gone to a day of therapy in their life, that's just a dry drunk. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
For somebody who's 7 years into their treatment, they can function on a level that your normie can't even function on, because they have so much into the sight in themselves. They've got so much practice at working on themselves that when things come up in the relationship, let's do one of these things together and let's work on this.
Yeah. And
so that's a two-parter for me.
There you go.
Do you have that history, and what have you done about it?
There you go. So, I'm going to start asking dates to show up with a letter from their psychologist. I think that's my
therapist.
new thing. Yeah, so their therapist, their coach.
And bring your own credentials, right?
What? You mean I have to heal too? No, that's not
fair.
Man.
Yeah. I love going to therapy. I love it.
Yeah. In fact, it probably just, I think I joked one time that I was going to start holding first dates at a therapist's office. We're not doing coffee or dinner, honey. We're just meeting at a head doc.
Intimate little setting.
Yeah. But the one thing I've found, and I don't know, I guess it's worked backwards for me because I'm still single, but the one thing I've found is knowing what my partner's trauma is and childhood blueprints is everything. I need to know if it's big T trauma, like sexual trauma. I need to know if it's little T trauma, because, to me, they're very different. Sexual trauma is very big T trauma. And knowing those different patterns of what their traumas were, even if they have them healed, can really help me. Because, I mean, women deal in emotion. So a lot of times they'll reaction and they'll go back to stuff without realizing it. And you've got to be able to see through it and go, wait, this is from your childhood. I see exactly where this is coming from. Yeah. But having that understanding is really important. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about the couples coaching that you do, that there's probably a lot of people that don't really understand the childhood of either people that are married.
No, they certainly don't connect, because it is confusing. Because let's say there was not sexual abuse, and therefore you just don't understand in adulthood why one partner is having, it's very asexual. It can't get into it or what have you. I don't understand it. But that person may have been severely neglected, emotionally neglected. And that neglect is a significant trigger, and they cannot be vulnerable in the physical context of sexual interaction. So it can be really confusing. And so I say, one of the chapters is called Secrets Destroy. The secrets that we keep, especially what we consider shameful or toxic secrets, part of the problem with it is it just doesn't get aired out. It doesn't get resolved. It doesn't get attended to. So like you said, if I do want to know my partner's traumas, and on top of that, I want to know what's the healthiest way that I can be supportive of that, and what is the stuff that it's not my job, it's my partner's job for them to take care of. And it's really helpful to know that. And that's, again, partly knowing what happened, but then almost more importantly, knowing what do we do about it when that gets triggered. Do I need to encourage you to push through it, or do I need to take a step back and breathe with you and just practice calming down? Like you said earlier, when you walk away from the situation, come back to it. Oftentimes that's what we end up doing is let's take care of ourselves first. I'll help you calm down. I'll calm myself down. And then tomorrow we'll come back to it, or we'll bring that to the therapist or what have you. Depends.
There you go. Thanks for Petunia I need the link. We put the links to his book and his website in the things. There'll also be a link on the Chris Voss Show. What else do we have here? Sounds way too practical. Therapist first dates. So he's loving that. And some different things. So there you go. Thanks, Matthew, for your comments on the show. Lots of good stuff here. We could probably talk for hours and hours on this.
Oh, man. I'm enjoying this. I love it.
Charged by the hour. So there you go. But, people that buy the book, they need to get into therapy. One of the things I rail against is these people will do alternative methods of therapy that are highly questionable, like crystals, or, I just need to manifest, I don't know, being healthy mindset. Some people read a book like you mentioned earlier and think that that's just fine. You really need to get into therapy if you have damage. Really is important.
Yes. Crystals, for example, in probably 2 or 3 different chapters, they can be a wonderful part of calming down, and they can be a wonderful part of the therapy. But when somebody chooses that as their sole method of trying to tend to a lifetime of dysfunctional family dynamics, it's just not. There are 20 variables here, and I'm sure there are more that I'm positive there are more that I have not spoken to. There are 20 variables here. If you don't have an answer to every single one of those, it's hard to be successful.
Definitely. So people should pick up your book wherever fine books are sold. give us your .coms and pitch out to people to pick up your book as we go out.
Yes, it's Ernest, Ellender, PhD.com. It's my website for my life coaching services. healfromchildhood.com is the website for the book. It's also available on Amazon, on the Amazon bookstore. This is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods, practical guide for healing past intergenerational stress and trauma. And I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn.
There you go. Thank you very much, Ernest, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Lots of fun and very serious chat. So hopefully some people learn some stuff. Pick up the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. It's entitled, This is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods. A Practical Guide for Healing Past Intergenerational Stress and Trauma, out March 15th, 2024. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one of the TikTokity, Chris Voss, Facebook.com, and all those crazy places on the internet. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Chris Voss. Be good to each other, stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.